Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Ciaran Collins. This is the weekly podcast for all your tillage news and advice. In this episode, I'll be discussing potato desiccation with Shay Phelan, Teagasc Potato Specialist, and I first asked Shay, what are potato crops like this year?
Similar to every other crop, Ciaran, I mean, they've had issues this year given the season that we've had. If we start at the beginning, a lot of the crop was planted in good conditions and very early. And in some cases, farmers finished planting earlier than they had ever done before. So they went in ideal conditions in late March and into April. Then, of course, in May, it often happens when you get crop planted early. We had a late frost, which certainly set the crop back about 2 to 3 weeks. And then in the northern half of the country, we were all hit by drought, so it actually set the crop back even more. And while some guys had access to irrigation, more didn't, and what that's led to is some scab issues out there, common scab issues, and also probably in a lot of cases a reduction in tuber numbers. So there's been those issues have come through the season all the way through, and what's also noticeable out there actually in quite a lot of crops, and just talking to guys in the last week, is quite a lot of blackleg starting to affect crops now. It had been there all season at low levels, but with the wet weather we've had in the last couple of weeks, it's certainly starting to become an issue, and that's going to become an issue, and we'll talk about maybe later on when we come to desiccation. And finally, I suppose in the last week or so, I'm hearing a lot of blight issues coming in different crops as well. So, while it has been a relatively good growing season, it hasn't been without its issues.
Okay, so similar to like a lot of cereals, I suppose, Shay, location kind of dictated what happened in the crop.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the crops further north, where there's a lack of moisture, seem to have suffered worse than the crops further south.
Okay, so I suppose at this time of year, a lot of farmers obviously are looking to burn off crops. So what should growers be looking at this stage?
Yeah, well, before they start to desiccate crops, I mean, they have to make sure that the crop is ready to be burned off. So you have to look at a couple of different issues here. So from the point of view of the first thing, for most table varieties here, we want a high dry matter potatoes. So we have to make sure that our dry matters are good. And guys, while most guys are aware, not everybody's aware that when you burn them off with chemical destruction, you normally lose about 1% in dry matter. So if you start at 20%, you'll probably end up at 19% by the time it comes to harvest. So most farmers want dry matters that are probably 21, 22%. So you need to start maybe a percent or 0.5% above where you want it to be to get the desired dry matter come harvest time. The other big issue that guys need to have a look at as well, and especially in the salad crops and in the seed crops, is tuber size. And this is a little bit trickier now than it used to be. So we need to have a look and see where our desired tuber size is going to be, whether that's 45, 55 mil or something like that. And you need to try and figure out or calculate what's the maximum fraction of your tubers that are going to be in that zone, maybe 40 to 50 mil or whatever it is. So you need to figure out what size tubers or what yield of tubers are going to be in that zone and maximize those. Again, with slower desiccations than we would have had access to maybe before, that's going to be a little bit trickier. And the third thing that we need to have a look at is that there is quite a lot of disease out there, so we need to be able to make sure that that disease is not going to spread. And as I mentioned, blackleg is an issue out there, so that has an impact when it comes to desiccating the crop.
Okay, so there's clearly a lot of things to think about before you take the decision to actually burn off. So, Shay, what options are there for growers at the moment in terms of burning off?
Well, the two main options that guys have are column destruction, which is going in with a flail and flailing the stems off the crop, and you also have your chemical destruction, your Spotlight Plus and your Gozai options there. Again, when you are doing it, they work completely differently in a way. If you're going into flail a crop, a flail will take off most of the hollow off the crop, so you're leaving about 8 inches of hollow at the top of the drill, and that pretty much stops the crop dead in its tracks. So the crop stops bulking, stops growing, and it stops pretty quickly. You then come in with a chemical desiccant, the likes of Spotlight Plus, and you spray it on to heal the wounds that are left behind by the flail, and you also put on a blight spray as well, just to keep blight at bay. The other option then that guys have are chemical destruction. So the two options that we have here at the moment are Spotlight Plus, which was available last year, and Gozai, which is new this year. We didn't have access to it last year, but it works pretty much in the same way as Spotlight does. And unfortunately, I suppose what most growers are worried about at the moment is the speed of desiccation from them. Whereas flailing is pretty immediate, although it's expensive to do and it's slow to do. And given the ground conditions at the moment, most crops are not suitable for flailing. Chemical destruction is going to be the way that guys are going to have to do it, but it is going to take time. Both Gozai and Spotlight, they take 3 to 4 weeks for full desiccation. They're stem desiccants primarily. They're not leaf desiccants. So we're going to have to just take our time with those and adjust our harvest heads accordingly.
Okay. So it looks like chemical desiccation is going to be what farmers are going to have to use at this stage, I suppose, given the weather conditions at the moment, and it'll be quite difficult for flailing, I'd imagine, if conditions are wet.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So I suppose, Shay, the big one really in this context is the loss of diquat. So overall, we'll say, what impact do you think that will have on desiccation strategies?
As you say, like diquat is a big loss to the industry, or would be a big loss to the industry when it comes to this end of the season. It was very good at stopping the crop, so it was pretty good on leaves destruction. So basically what it did was it desiccated the leaves and the stems started to die then after that. Whereas the PPOs that we have, the Gozai and the Spotlight Plus, are primarily stem desiccants, and they work on the stems first and then the leaves die afterwards. So that leaves the crop open for quite a bit of time to diseases like blight, likes of blackleg, to spread in the crop. So from that point of view, they are much slower. The crop continues to grow, and like I was mentioning earlier on about, say, the likes of tuber size, your crop will still bulk a little bit after getting an application of Spotlight and Gozai, whereas generally with diquat they stop growing and died fairly quickly.
Okay, so given that we're pretty much down to Gozai and Spotlight Plus, like, what advice would you give to farmers in terms of to get that best burn down? Maybe tank mixes or time of the day or weather conditions, are they factors?
They are indeed, yeah. First thing is timing, and timing is critical on this. Both Gozai and Spotlight, like I said, they're PPO inhibitors, so they work on stems, and they work best when the crop is starting to naturally senesce anyway. So that's why we kind of struggle with, say, like the seed crops or salad crops, because those crops are growing very strong when you want to take them down because the tubers are quite small. But for main crop varieties, the likes of Rooster or Kersh Pink or Marquise or any of those, they work better in that scenario because you're waiting to get the crop near to maturity, and once the crop gets to maturity, then the leaves start to die back. So they work best at that time. So if you can time it that the crop is starting to naturally senesce, that you'll get better activity. Other things that guys should be looking at are the time of day that you apply it. So from the point of view of desiccating the leaves and getting maximum effect on the leaves, both Gozai and Spotlight work best in bright sunny conditions when the UV light is at its most intense, and that generally occurs in the middle of the day. So you're talking somewhere from about 11 o'clock in the day till about 11 o'clock in the morning till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's your best timing for getting this stuff on in bright sunny conditions. That's not to say that these products won't work in dull conditions late in the evening or early in the morning. Yes, they will, but they'll be much slower. So if we're trying to get the maximum from these products and getting the crop to die back as quickly as you possibly can, we should be doing it at that time of the day, and obviously in as dry conditions as you can possibly get on. The other thing we need to do in order to get the best activity out of them is keep water volumes up. So you're looking at, probably up to 400 litres a hectare to try and get as maximum coverage as you can down to the base of those canopies. Because some of those canopies, especially likes of Keris Pink, are very, very big canopies and tend to be tall. So you need to be able to get the application down to the base of those canopies as you possibly can. The other thing is you're looking at a 2-spray strategy for maybe even a three spray strategy for these products. So you could be looking at going in and opening the crop with a spotlight in day 1, coming in after 7 days, coming in with an application of Gozai, and maybe a third application of spotlight then after that. And obviously you have to watch out for your maximum total doses as well, and harvest intervals. Spotlight has a 7-day harvest interval, and Gozai has a 14-day harvest interval. So it's not just as straightforward as it used to be. There's a lot more for guys to think about now and how to do it. The beauty of diquat years ago was that it pretty much didn't matter what crop you were going into. It desiccated everything, whereas these are much more particular on how they work.
Okay, and just that you mentioned how particular that they work, Shay, is there any advantage in maybe the likes of an adjuvant or anything that we can use to aid these products?
Yeah, again, I'm kind of looking a little bit at this at the moment, and AHDB have done some trials in the last 2 years on this. Some guys are looking at likes of trace elements, particularly likes of copper, zinc, boron, and molybdenum, which at high levels are toxic to the plant anyway. Now, again, you just need to be careful of those. Are they going to have any effect on the tubers? So tuber quality is everything, so you don't want anything that's going to affect those. Other guys are using likes of adjuvants, stickers, wetters, penetrants that are going to stick the desiccant to the leaves to try and scorch those leaves as best they possibly can. Kind of the opposite of what we want to do with a crop during the middle of the season. You don't want to scorch them. This time of the year, they are looking to see if they can be a little bit harsher on the leaves. Then there are other options, I suppose, that guys are trialing, and I know certainly in the UK they're using salts, so the likes of sodium chloride in solutions, but you're looking at huge volumes of active ingredient there. You're looking at applying maybe 1,000 or 1,100 litres per hectare onto a crop with specialized equipment, because these salts are tough on working parts of sprayers. So there are guys looking at these things. There's really nothing out there to say that anything is going to be a huge addition to the products that are there already if they're applied in time.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Shay. I suppose the other one then is I'm looking out the window here and I can see, for the last week it's been quite humid and wet. I suppose typical blighty conditions really. And given that the likes of Spotlight and Gozai, or as you said already, are much slower acting than diquat would have been, is there any implications there in terms of blight control or anything that we need to do differently?
Yeah, again, as you mentioned, they are slower. So in my experience, you're probably talking that the crop is going to be live for an extra 2, maybe even 3 weeks, depending on the variety. So in that case, you still have to protect the crop and the leaves that are there, okay? And especially crops that are going to long-term storage. So if you have a crop that you're going to store till next March, April, May, or whatever it is, you have to be sure that there's no blight or zoospores falling down onto the tubers and infecting the tubers. So from that point of view, you need a pretty robust blight control strategy for the next couple of weeks, and bearing in mind that we're not sure if we have this 37A2 strain of blight, which is resistant to fluazinum that we find in Shirland and Volley and those products. We do need to be cognizant of that as well, that we have to use alternative chemistry to fluazinum, maybe like Ranman Top or Infinite or even Zorvec. But again, the other issue that comes with that is that we have to make sure that we don't exceed our maximum number of applications for these products, So those extra 2 applications could push us up towards the limits of what we're allowed to apply with the different fungicides.
Okay, and I suppose, Shay, maybe looking to the future a little bit, like, is there anything that, given that you said there that those desiccants work best on crops that are starting to die, is there anything that we should do agronomy wise maybe in the future that might maybe stagger the harvest or anything like that growers maybe could watch out for?
Yeah, it's a good point, Ciaran, because like we said earlier on with diquat is pretty good shutting a crop down, whereas these products that we have available now don't work that way. So from the point of view of our desiccation strategy and harvest strategy going forward, basically what we have to do is we have to look at managing our crop come harvest time a little bit differently. So from that point of view, what guys should be looking at is maybe trying to allocate a proportion of their harvest, maybe 3, 4, 5 days digging at the beginning of October, and handle that crop slightly differently than you would the rest of the crop. Okay, so from that point of view, you're trying to get that first couple of fields that you're going to harvest to die off a little bit earlier. Maybe manage them in such a way that they're starting to senesce that little bit earlier, so your spotlight and your goes eye work better on those crops. So that might mean, you know, reducing the level of nitrogen on those crops a little bit. It might mean cheating those seed or aging the seed, making the physiological age of the seed a little bit higher, so that you can so that they will die off that a little bit better. So it's about preparing that first harvested crop that you're going to have for harvest that week or so earlier, so that your rest of your crop can take that extra week for the spotlight and goes to work, because they will work. It's just that they take longer to get to where you want them to be.
Okay. So it's a bit like having a harvest strategy, really, that you can kind of phase it
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the way we're going to probably have to manage it from now on.
And Shay, I've one final one for you. I suppose many growers at the moment now with late season varieties, roosters, pinks, or marquies, I suppose they might be very green at the moment, but you know, farmers are looking at saying, okay, it'll be early October when I'll be harvesting. What should they do now with those crops?
Like I say earlier on, for a lot of growers now, flailing probably isn't an option. Ground conditions are starting to deteriorate, and given the rain that's forecast over the next couple of days, it probably isn't going to be an option for a lot of them. And in a lot of cases, tram lines are so bad in many fields that, you know, you wouldn't be able to desiccate tram lines anyway. So from that point of view, we're really looking at your chemical desiccants. And again, it's about how do we maximize those chemical desiccants now. And like I said, time of the day, maybe adding in an adjuvant or something like that to make sure that they stick fully to the crop. Keeping your water volumes up to make sure that you get full penetration into the crop. Nozzle type is actually very important as well. So, you know, like guys that are using flat fan nozzles don't get the same penetration into a big canopy that you would say with angled nozzles or low drift nozzles, and you alternate them back and front so that, you know, you're getting full coverage across the width of the boom. So it's using those chemical desiccants, like we said earlier on, and the way we do it, and getting the maximum that we can out of it. That's about as good as we can do for crops at the moment.
Okay. Listen, Shay, thanks very much. There's brilliant information there. And as you've said there, life has got very complicated in terms of desiccation since the loss of diquat, and there's a lot more planning involved. So again, Shay, thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you.
That's it for the Tillage Edge this week. And my thanks to Shay for joining me on the show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss a show. For more farming information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Ciaran Collins. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.